everyone, so we're talking about polynomials, linear factors, and zeros. So we're really going to connect what we did last time of solving polynomials and see what exactly that means when we are graphing these. So in general, the following are equivalent statements about a polynomial f of x and a real number b. First, x minus b is a linear factor of f of x, so when I'm factoring it, x minus b is a factor there. Next, b is a zero of the polynomial function y equals f of x. B is also a root or solution of the polynomial equation f of x equals 0, and b is an x-intercept of the graph of y equals f of x. So we can use all this information when we are graphing our functions. And something else that we can use to help us graph these functions is something called multiplicity of zeros. So what we see is if a linear factor is repeated in the complete factored form of a polynomial, the zero related to that factor is a multiple of 0. And the multiplicity of 0 is the number of times the related linear factor is repeated. So for instance, I could have that f of x is equal to x minus 1 times x minus 1. And so I see that factor x equals 1 has multiplicity of 2 because the factor x minus 1 is repeated twice. And some pattern that we see with multiplicity of zeros is that if the zero has an odd multiplicity, then the graph passes through the axis at that 0. So that would look like if I had this graph here, it passes through. So it passes through at that 0 or that x-intercept. On the other hand, if the 0 has an even multiplicity, then the graph touches the axis. So an example of that is when we would have our parabolas, and I see it here. It touches, but it doesn't pass through. So we're going to use that information to help us graph these polynomials. So I'm going to first find the zeros of the polynomials and then graph the function. So first I want to find the zeros. Here, this is already factored out for us, so I have three equations. I have 1/2 x equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0, and x plus 2 is equal to 0. Solving that first one, I get x equals 0. This next one, I get x is equal to 3. And then this last one, I get that x is equal to negative 2. Now I'm going to note what my multiplicities are because it's going to tell me whether the graph passes through or touches the axis at those points. I see for x equals 0, there's only one x there, so that has multiplicity 1. For x equals 3, since it's x minus 3 squared, that's really the same thing as x minus 3 times x minus 3. So that means this one's going to have multiplicity 2. And then there's only one linear factor of x plus 2, so this one has multiplicity of 1. Okay, next I want to find other points. So I already have the zeros of 0, 3, and negative 2. But now I need to find some points between those zeros. So between the zeros 0 and negative 2, I have negative 1. So I can plug in negative 1 into the equation. And so when I plug in negative 1, I have 1/2 times negative 1 times negative 1 minus 3 squared times negative 1 plus 2. And when I plug that in, I get negative 8. So negative 1, negative 8. And then between the points 0 and 3, it doesn't matter which one you can do. You can do 1 or 2. I'm just going to go ahead and use 2. And when I plug that in, I get 4. Okay, so I have some other points in here. Now, like we did in previous lesson, we need to figure out our end behavior because that's going to tell us, it's going to kind of guide us on how we go through those points. So my end behavior, I needed to look at that first term and see whether that power was even or odd and whether the coefficient was positive or negative. Here, it's not in that form, so we kind of have to multiply this in our head to figure out what that first term would be. Well, I have a 1/2 out in front, so that 1/2 is going to be there. And I just need to figure out what power this polynomial is going to be. Well, I have 1x here. This x is going to be squared, and then 1x here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So my power is even. My a is positive. So that means my end behavior is going to be up and up. So when I'm going through these points, I'm going to start up. I get to a 0, and I need to figure out, am I passing through or am I touching the axis? Well, I see this is multiplicity of 1, so that means I am, for -2, it's multiplicity of 1, so I'm passing through. Coming up to another 0. I have x equals 0, that's multiplicity of 1, that's an odd, so I'm passing through. Now, x equals 3, that one was multiplicity of 2. So since that's an even number, that means I'm just touching it. And then I end up. Okay, let's look at one more. Here I have 1/3 x squared times x minus 2 times x plus 2 squared. So here my zeros are 1/3 x squared equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0, and x plus 2 equals 0. So I have x equals 0, x equals 2, and x equals -2. Looking at these powers, I have a squared here and a squared here, so that means that my x equals 0 and my x equals -2 have multiplicity of 2. This middle one is just multiplicity of 1. And so I can plot those points. So I have -2, 0, and 2. Next, I need to find some other points. So here I'm going to use the points -1 and 1, so those are between my zeros. So plugging in -1, I have 1/3 times -1 squared times -1 minus 2 times -1 plus 2 squared. And when I plug that in, I get -1. So I have the point -1, -1. And then when I plug in 1, I get -3. So I have some other points. Now I need to figure out my end behavior. Well, I see I have a 1/3 out in front. And now I need to figure out what my power of x is going to be. Well, I have a square, and I have a squared, so that has 4 x's, and then I have one more. So this is going to be x to the 5th power. So here my n is odd, my power is odd, my a is positive, so that means that this one is going to be down and up. So I'm going to start down. Now I need to figure out which ones I'm just going to pass through and which ones I'm going to go through. My -2 has multiplicity of 2, so that means I'm touching it. My 0 also has multiplicity of 2, so that means I'm just touching it. But this last 0 has multiplicity of 1, so that means I'm going to pass through. So going through, I start down, I touch, and then pass through.